The rain fell steadily that November evening, creating rivers along the downtown sidewalks. Margaret stood beneath the bus shelter, her 3-month-old daughter Emily bundled against her chest. The baby stirred slightly, making those soft sounds that only a mother truly understands. Margaret was 32, with long blonde hair that fell in gentle waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater, practical and warm, though it was beginning to soak through at the edges. Her delicate necklace caught the streetlight, a small silver pendant, the last gift from her grandmother. The bus was late again. 40 minutes now. Emily would need feeding soon. And Margaret still had 3 transfers to make before reaching the small apartment they called home. She glanced down at her daughter's peaceful face and felt that familiar mixture of love and worry that had become her constant companion these past months. Single motherhood wasn't something she'd planned, but life rarely asks permission before changing course. "Excuse me, miss." Margaret looked up to find a man standing at the edge of the shelter. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair swept back from his face, wearing a light blue dress shirt that was thoroughly soaked. Rain dripped from his shoulders, but he seemed unconcerned. "I couldn't help but notice you've been waiting quite a while," he said gently. "I have my car just there. I'd be happy to give you and your little one a ride somewhere dry." Margaret's first instinct was caution. She'd been raised to be careful, especially now that she had Emily to protect. But something in the man's eyes, a genuine kindness, perhaps, made her pause. "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully, "but I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition at all," he replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm James Whitmore. I work downtown and I'm heading north anyway. You look like you could use some help, and honestly, it would ease my conscience to know you both got home safely." There was something old-fashioned about his courtesy, something that reminded Margaret of her father. She made a decision that surprised herself. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Whitmore. I'm Margaret Reynolds, and this is Emily." "It's a pleasure to meet you both," James said with a warm smile. His car was parked nearby, a sleek, dark sedan, though Margaret knew little about makes and models. James opened the passenger door first, making sure she and Emily were settled before walking around to the driver's side. As they pulled into traffic, the heater began warming the car's interior. Margaret felt herself relax slightly, though she kept Emily close. "How old is she?" James asked, his eyes on the road. 3 months, Margaret replied. 3 months and 2 days, actually. She's been sleeping better lately, which is a blessing. I imagine that's quite a journey at this hour, taking the bus with an infant. "It is," Margaret admitted. "But we manage. I work mornings at the hospital cafeteria while my neighbor watches Emily. Then I have an evening cleaning job 3 times a week. Tonight was one of those nights." She surprised herself with her honesty. Perhaps it was the gentle rhythm of the rain, or the warmth of the car, or simply the relief of not being alone in that cold shelter. "That's a full schedule," James said quietly. "You must be tired." "Tired is just part of it now," Margaret said with a small smile. "But Emily's worth every moment. She really is." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. James didn't pry, didn't ask the questions Margaret usually dreaded. "Where's the father? Why are you alone?" Instead, he simply drove, occasionally pointing out landmarks or commenting on the weather with the ease of someone who understood that sometimes quiet kindness speaks louder than words. "Where did you say you were heading?" James asked after a time. Margaret gave him the address, apologizing for how far it was. James simply nodded and adjusted their route. "It's no trouble at all," he assured her. "Really?" As they drove through the city streets, past neighborhoods that gradually became more modest, Margaret found herself talking more freely. She spoke about Emily's first smile, about the challenge of making ends meet, about her dreams of eventually finishing her nursing degree. James listened with genuine interest, occasionally sharing small observations that showed he truly heard her words. He mentioned his own mother, who'd raised him and his sister alone after his father passed away when James was young. "She worked 3 jobs, too," he said softly. "I remember her coming home late, tired beyond words, but she always had time to ask about our day. Always had time to make sure we knew we were loved." That's what matters most, Margaret said, looking down at Emily. The love. Everything else we'll figure out somehow. When they finally reached Margaret's apartment building, a modest 3-story structure in need of fresh paint. James pulled to the curb and turned off the engine. Let me walk you to the door, he said. The rain's still coming down. Margaret wanted to protest, but Emily was stirring now, beginning to fuss, and the thought of struggling with her keys in the rain while holding the baby seemed overwhelming. She accepted gratefully. James held an umbrella over them as Margaret unlocked the building's front door. In the harsh fluorescent light of the entryway, she turned to thank him properly. Mr. Whitmore, I can't tell you how much this meant to us tonight. You've been incredibly kind to 2 strangers. James, please, he said. And it was my privilege, truly. He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. Margaret, I wonder if I might ask you something. Would you allow me to help you? Not as charity, but as someone who understands how hard it is to do everything alone. Margaret felt her defenses rise instinctively. I couldn't accept. Please hear me out, James said gently. I run a company downtown. We have an opening for an administrative assistant. Good hours, better pay, and the position includes childcare benefits. You could bring Emily to work with you until she's old enough for the company daycare. Margaret stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. You run a company? Whitmore Industries, James said simply. Perhaps you've seen the building, the tall one with the green glass near the financial district. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. I'm not offering this lightly. I saw something tonight, a mother's dedication, her strength, her grace under pressure. Those are exactly the qualities I value in the people I work with. Margaret looked at the card, her hands trembling slightly. The title read, James Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. I had no idea, she whispered. I didn't want you to know, James said with a kind smile. I wanted to help because it was right, not because of who I am or what I... A year later, on another rainy November evening, Margaret stood in that same bus shelter during her lunch break. She'd come to drop off donations at the nearby community center, bags of warm clothes and baby items she no longer needed. She saw a young woman with an infant waiting in the rain, and Margaret didn't hesitate. She walked over, umbrella in hand, and smiled. I have my car nearby, she said gently. Would you like a ride somewhere dry? The cycle of kindness continued, rippling outward like those rain puddles on the sidewalk, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen, because that's what we're meant to do for one another. Extend a hand. Offer shelter. Share warmth when the world feels cold. Not for recognition or reward, but because we remember what it felt like to stand alone in the rain, hoping for a miracle. And sometimes, miracles arrive in the most unexpected ways, through the kindness of strangers who become friends, through second chances offered and accepted, through the simple, profound act of one human being seeing another's need and choosing to help. Margaret never forgot that November night. Neither did James, who would often say that meeting Margaret and Emily reminded him why he'd built his company in the first place, not just for profit, but for purpose. To create opportunities, to change lives, to pass forward the kindness his own mother had received when she needed it most. Years later, when Margaret had completed her nursing degree and Emily was in school, she would tell her daughter about that rainy night. Always remember, sweetheart, she would say, that kindness is never wasted. It matters more than money, more than status, more than anything else in this world. And when someone extends their hand to you, receive it with grace. Then when you're able, extend your hand to someone else. Emily would nod, already understanding that the greatest gift they'd received wasn't the job or the opportunity. It was the reminder that goodness still exists, that people still care, and that even on the coldest, rainiest nights, warmth can find us if we're brave enough to accept it. The rain continues to fall, as it always will. But somewhere in every storm, there are those who offer shelter, and somewhere in every darkness, there are those who bring light. We need only have the courage to see them, and the grace to become them.